all, thank you to Lisa. And, you know, Lisa and I had worked very hard putting together such a great women's seder that we were so excited to do. And Lisa called me up and she said, this was already a few weeks ago, before I feel like it got like massive, you know. She goes, I have really bad news. And I was like, oh boy, what could this bad news be? She says, Michael wants to cancel the women's seder. And I was like, no. And my first response was, I really trust Michael. So I know that if he's canceling this, like, you know, like, I'm sure that this is the right thing to do, but oh my gosh. Anyway, so I was really disappointed. And then Lisa sent me a text the day of the Seder, and she was just like, you know, I had a moment today just thinking about one of our favorite nights of the year and where we should have been and what it could have looked like. And it's just so different. And just to kind of start and to frame the next little time that we have together, I guess that's almost like the frame that I want to put around it. And that is that, you know, we really do. We have a feeling of, you know, thank God we live in a world where we're going to discuss a little bit about what freedom really means tonight, but we live in a world where we have freedom and we have choices and we make plans, and thank God, like, they usually happen. And so when we're thrown something like this that just feels so out of our realm and so out of our control, it feels so I should say it could feel so trapped. And what I'm hoping is that we can kind of reframe and look at this time that we have, especially specifically because we're talking about Passover preparedness, but especially making the most out of this Passover, some of the themes that we see that are very, very relevant around Passover. And as Jews, how we're supposed to be responding to this entire situation. So, you know, we try, you know, especially like if we have young children, if we have young grandchildren, and we want to give them the memories and the fuzzy feels and all that good stuff, it's really, it's incumbent, like, we must do our very best to come to Passover somewhat prepared, both physically prepared, emotionally prepared, and really ready to have a very different type of Passover, but perhaps different doesn't have to be bad. And perhaps there's some depth into what's going on that can really open up our souls, open up our minds, and really make it something that's very special. So I just want to say that any learning or any ideas that are shared tonight really should be in merit for the sick people who are suffering, for the souls who we've lost, all the souls that we've lost from this terrible, terrible virus. May their souls be elevated and may their families be comforted. And also may our learning just be in merit that there's a tremendous miracle and a salvation that's brought to the entire world. You know, over the course of the Passover story, we see this word a lot. We see the Hebrew word of nes, a miracle. We see that word coming up a lot. Certainly, as the Jews are working, you know, gearing up towards the Exodus, and you see like all these miracles that are happening, and something very interesting. Vicki, you may remember this from one of the Tuesday classes that we've done, but there's a very similar root word. Oh, Vicki and Nancy. Nes, the word miracle in Hebrew, comes from the same root word as the Hebrew word nisayon. They come from the same root, nes, nisayon. Nes is a miracle, and nisayon is a test. And I think there's a lot of connections between miracles and tests, and sometimes you have to pass the test to see the miracle, and sometimes the miracle itself is the test to see how you're going to respond. But I would say that for this year's purposes, let's give a prayer that we recognize that we're in a tremendous test right now, and at moments I'm sure we all feel like we are passing the test with flying colors, and I'm sure there are moments where we feel like we're flunking, and that's normal. That's very okay, you know, to have those moments and those ups and those downs and all those things. But I guess what our prayer and our overall feeling should be is, God, we recognize that this is a test. We are trying our very best, right? Like you said, Cheryl, we're all doing our very best, and let us see miracles from this test. So, you know, let us be able to pass this test and see miracles on the other end. And to that we'll really respond, amen. Certainly when we say the Manishtana this year, Manishtana halayla hazem mikol halaylot, it's almost chilling. You know, it's almost like, yeah, you know, like the timing is so bizarre that this is just happening around Passover time. And if you haven't yet noticed any themes, so the original, and I think this is one of the most unbelievable thoughts, that the original Karban Pesach, which was the original sacrifice that the Jewish people had to do, they had to take the Egyptian god, which was a lamb at the time. That was what they that was what they served, and they were told to take the sheep, the sheep, tie it to their bedpost, and then they were going to slaughter that lamb, eat it as a sacrifice, enjoy the festive meal with only their families, with nobody else, because do not leave your house and go with other people right now, because there's a horrible plague that's going on outside of your doors. And that was the plague of the death of the firstborn, right? That's why they had to put some of the blood on their doorposts. And God passed over their doorposts if they did accordingly, and knew that that was the home of a Jew, and he was able to jump over that house, and then hopefully they were saved from that dangerous plague. So there is something almost like eerily similar as we get Passover prepared in thinking about what our home is going to look like. Are we going to be able to, quote unquote, eat that Passover sacrifice with our families in whatever meaningful way we can, while this plague goes on outside of us, and it is literally dangerous for us to leave our home? So that's kind of like an eerie, you know, it's very, very interesting that's happening around this time, you know. I don't think it's for no reason. I'm sure that is something that is divine. So we want to always look towards our history and towards the past, and look at what the traditions are that we have, look at the different commandments that we have, look at what this is all about in the past. Because as you know, or maybe if you don't know, I just want to remind you that Judaism is it's super duper relevant. Anything that we do is not like just for the sake of like, oh, this is like fun, you know, this is like really, like we don't just eat the matzah because it's just traditional, you know. It is traditional, that is true, but there's a tremendous amount of holiness and a tremendous amount of insight and meaning and inspiration, and it's not just something that we do. There's something that's connecting us back to our past, that's supposed to be turning the key inside of us and opening us up so that we can properly experience the holiday. And every holiday is like this. Any of the mitzvot that we're given are clues for us into what are we tapping into? What's the greatness over here, right? What is it that our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents have given to us, right? So there's so much depth there. So what I really would like to do is I want to go back in the story, and I want to focus specifically, because I'm speaking to a group of women, I'd really like to focus on what role the women played in the Exodus, and how those lessons are super duper relevant for us during this quarantine time. And I hope that with the insight that we see, that we can, you know, really hopefully take something away that will enhance our own seders. Now, if you are planning on doing any type of virtual seder with any of your family, any of your friends, always come somewhat prepared. So that's why it's super duper important that you start to think, like, what is that going to look like? If you are going to be doing a Zoom session, you want to think about the overall theme that you want to be giving over to either your children or your grandchildren, right? Today, somebody sent me a time capsule. It was a document that you print out. It was given to me for my children. She sent it to me. And the idea was, you know, putting down your thoughts. putting down your feelings. What are you doing to keep busy? Share a picture of this, display this, you know, all these different, like a diary of what's been going on, just so that people can remember what's been happening during this time. So if you will, I almost want you to think about, if you're going to be doing that virtual seder and you feel like it's up to you to be giving over that inspiration, I want you to be thinking about what is it that you would want them and you to be writing in your capsule in terms of what your seder looks like the year of the quarantine. What are the memories that you want to be able to give over? What are the feelings that you want them to feel? What's the overall theme that you want them to know? So as Jews, I could tell you that the overall theme that we're going to always want to try to tie the next generation to as much as possible is the theme that there's a God, and that God has a plan to everything that he does. And there is no story that is more clear. Well, we just finished the holiday of Purim, so I would say that story certainly is an incredible point to show this theme as well. But there is the story of Passover, and the details that go on in the Exodus is such a powerful story to show ourselves and the next generation about how, look what God did for our nation. Look what he did. Look at all these miracles that happened. The same God that put us into Egypt also took us out of Egypt. You know, it's interesting. My daughter actually asked this weekend, like, why is it such a big deal that he took us out? He put us in the first place. You know, like, it's like, you know, you're gonna lock me up in my room and then take the key and unlock the door. Like, yippee-doo-dah day. Like, you put me in the room in the first place. I'm not gonna be praising you for the next many years that you got me out of that dungeon. Like, you put me in there, right? But with God, it's different, because he put us in there for us to go through a certain experience as a nation, to be able to gain certain strength that all of us, meaning me and you, today are still tapping into the strength that our great-great-great-great-grandparents had and gave us from the time that they were put into Egypt, starting all the way back. So I want to take you a little bit on a journey, and I'm going to be sharing with you different insights and different tidbits and different stories. I will say, I'm going to open up my chat screen now. So Lisa, I'm okay if people specifically are confused at a certain point. Feel free to shoot a chat, you know, it's open up on my side of the screen. So I want to start off, you know, we go through the steps of the Seder. And the third step, we have Kaddish, which is when we sanctify the wine. We are now getting into the right mood. We're elevating our whole meal. And then we have Orchas, where we wash away. There's a certain washing that we do. So just to note on that piece, it's a very interesting thing, because usually when you want to jump into something holy, when you want to jump into something, the word Kaddish actually means sanctifying, holy, right? Why do we wash after we sanctify? Wouldn't it make sense to first wash, get rid of whatever, you know, spiritual, quote unquote, you know, spiritual dirt might be on our fingertips, and then jump into the beautiful sanctification of Kiddush? Has anybody ever thought of this? Fascinating, right? What's going on? Why do we first start with Kiddush? Why don't we first start with the washing and then jump into Kiddush? And the idea is, any thoughts on that, by the way, why we first start with Kiddush? The idea is that because we first have to, by starting, and this is very, very applicable to what's going on right now, anytime we want to grow, anytime we want to show that we're making some kind of stride towards greatness, you want to first show that you haven't just turned away from the bad, but you're actively pursuing good. You're actively pursuing good. There are, if you're familiar with the Hebrew terms, there's the words called sor meirah, which means you turn from bad, va'aseh tov, and then you do good. That's usually like a traditional idea. Like, you got to stop doing the bad thing. Let's say, for example, somebody decides they want to be, you know, making strides in the way that they speak. They find that they're gossiping a lot. And so they're going to try to make strides. So they have to first stop saying the bad things in order to get to the next step. They can't just continue being a chit-chat gossiper and think that they're going to make strides in the next step, right? They have to first turn away from the bad, and then they can start doing all the good. But what the message of having Kaddish first is, you know what? Wherever we are, whatever we are actively jumping into this holiness. We are actively pursuing good. We're not just turning away from bad. We'll get to that afterwards, but we're making strides to grow. We're making strides to be better. So I think that that's a really powerful idea to frame the Seder, because especially at this time of quarantine, where I hope and pray that, especially for the ones that I'm speaking to on this call, but I hope and pray that this is true for the whole world. I really hope that we're not going to be the same world after this quarantine as we were before. Let's hope and pray that everybody's taking their own messages, because there's not one universal message. Every person has their own message that they can be taking away from this quarantine. And let's hope that we can jump in to doing that good, jump into that action. And that's what we do by Kaddish. The third part of the Seder, now we're going back to the story. The third part of the Seder is called karpas. Karpas is when we take a vegetable and we dip it into salt water. It's supposed to remind us of the tears. And it's very interesting because the word pas, if you were a textbook, a Jewish textbook, guru type of person, the word pas might jump out at you. It's noted somewhere else. And the place where it's noted is when Joseph and his technicolored coat. It's called kisones pasim, pas, that same word, kar pas. It's spelled the same way. It's the same thing, okay? It's the same thing. It means like a cloth, a cloak, something. Why in the world does the dipping of the vegetable have to start and remind us of Joseph's coat? And let me remind you something else of Joseph's coat. It was also dipped. It was dipped into blood to make his father think that he was killed, right? That was what it was dipped into. It was dipped into blood. So now we're making some kind of a bizarre comparison to the dipping of the vegetable into salt water, comparing it to Joseph's technicolor coat, dipping it into blood. Why? What does this have to do anything? And I'll tell you, because that's where it all began. That's where the story of our history all started. It goes way back. That was pre-Egypt days. That was before the Jewish people were placed into Egypt. And if I could just remind you really fast what went on, right? There was this jealousy, this animosity, and this angst that the brothers had towards Joseph, threw him into the pit. He gets sold. And who picks him up? A group of people going down to Egypt. Fast forward the story, and he ends up being stuck in Egypt. Ultimately, he ends up being built up to, the assistant to Pharaoh. But guess what? That's how we got down there in the first place, right? That's how they went down. The brothers went down to meet him. They went down. They recognized that it was their brother. And thus began our story, okay? And it all started with that piece of jealousy. So let's just go back to our history and recognize where it all began from. But then, once our nation was already put into that position and we were stuck in the depths, in that burning, disgusting place, Egypt was, not only were they horrible to us, but we kind of hit rock bottom over there. The Jewish nation, it says that we couldn't go any lower. We were almost on the very lowest level of impurity that a nation could possibly have gotten. And then somehow God still took us out. So we're thrown into this place, and they go through hell and back, right? They go through so much. And that's what gives our nation the strength today. That's what gives all of us the strength to recognize what they went through and that they got out. That should be very, very encouraging and inspiring. And by the way, fill it in with all the other historical things that have happened over the years, right? Those are the events that give us, it's all part of our DNA. That's all part of who we are. It's very powerful. Okay. So what I want to now go into is the idea that, and again, for those of you who have heard some of my classes, some of these themes will be themes that I have already spoken about, so it will be a good review for you. So the Jews are down in Egypt, and Pharaoh sees in the stars, his astrologers tell him that there's going to be a leader that's going to be born, and he's going to come from the nation of the Jewish people, and it's going to be a boy. So he makes a horrible decree, and he says all boys should be thrown into the Nile River. Anybody who's going to be delivering a baby boy, if you don't throw those baby boys into the Nile River, then you're going to be killed. So we're told that there's two midwives at the time, and their names were Shifra and Pua. And they were the ones who were delivering these babies. And you tell me, were they killing these baby boys or not? No, they were not killing these baby boys. Somehow they were miraculously delivering these babies and keeping them alive, right? That was what was so incredible. And we know the commentaries tell us that these people named Shifra and Pua were none other than Yocheved, who was Moses' mother. Moshe's mother was Yocheved, and his sister Miriam. These were who these two people were. And we see that that's kind of like the first bookend of where the story of the horrible treatment that the Jews got, like what we call in Hebrew the shibud, like the enslavement of the Jewish people. It starts off with that. And the first bookend is women. And you're going to see as we travel through the story, the next bookend is going to be bracketed off also by women. You're going to see the theme. And that's why I think it's so powerful to remember that as women, we have so much power, especially during this time, especially. So the lesson that we learn from here is that there was something that was driving these midwives even more than the fear of Pharaoh. On what is fear of God. But when we talk about fear of God, it's not a fear that we're talking about that feels scary, but it's a fear of like reverence and awesomeness. And it's like coupled together with Ahavas Hashem, which is love of God. And when you have very strong Yirat Hashem, when you have fear of heaven, it kind of pushes away the fear from other people and from humans. So what they were able to do is they said, like, okay, so very nice. Like Pharaoh told us to throw these boys into the Nile River. Like, we're not going to kill these boys. No way. We have a plan. And somehow they were able to deliver these babies and not throw them into the Nile. It was the fear that gave them the hope and the ability to look beyond the moments. They didn't just say, okay, like Pharaoh said, we got to kill them. No, they thought about the future. They thought, if I can save this one baby boy right now, there's a whole life, there's a whole future that's ahead. There's a whole nother world that will be waiting. We just got to get through this moment. And I think that that's really, really an important lesson, which I'll just finish up with this theme in a second. But Pharaoh he becomes aware of this, and he says, like, what is going on? Why did you do this? Why are you keeping these boys alive? Why are you giving life to the Jewish nation? And the midwives answer him with the word in Hebrew. They say to him, Ki chayot hena. They said, Ki chayot hena. They are chayot. Now, there's two ways that you can translate the word chayot. One way of translating it is they're like wild animals. They're just giving birth in the fields where they're so fast, we can't even keep up with them. Like by the time we get there to help them deliver the baby and throw the baby into the Nile. Like, they've already delivered the baby. They're like animals of the wild. That's number one. But the second one is chayot, which means they're a living force, a force to be reckoned with. You know, like they are the life force of the Jewish nation. And we are not going to be able to overcome that. They are strong, they are powerful, and they are the ones that are giving over life to this nation. So now, during this quarantine time, we think about this, and we think about how we can bring life to others. Over this Passover, you know, whoever those other people are, whether they're family members, whether they're our friends, whether they're strangers, what are we as women of the Jewish nation doing to be the chayot, to be the force of life that's bringing life to other people, that's not just, you know, just getting by, but that's really giving over the idea of life. And so I think, you know, when you're talking, when we're chatting in the beginning of this call and you say you're doing a Zoom chat with this and a Zoom chat with that, like, that's what we're talking about, you know, looking towards the future, recognizing there's life beyond this. This will pass. There's going to be an end in sight, and we got to be able to inspire and infuse this moment with life as Jewish women. Okay. The second idea is that the famous story when Moses is born. I forgot to bring my water, and I'm like, sorry. When Moses is born, and there's this beautiful light that comes into the room, and it's very, very clear that this very special soul has just been born. And for a few months, somehow, his mother, Yocheved, and his sister Miriam were able to hide him. You know, they were able to hide him. But came to the time that he was about 3 months old, and there was no more hiding. They needed to do something with this child if they didn't want to be caught. So what they did was they put him into a basket, and they put him onto the Nile, right? The very famous story. And Miriam is kind of there as the sister who's watching from behind the reeds. She watches merachok. She watches from a distance. And I think that word is very interesting right now because rachok means far. And I think that so many of us feel this richok, this distance. I mean, thank God for technology. Thank God, thank God, thank God. But the distance between us is crazy, you know? I mean, it's like I can't, you know, you can all relate. You just want to jump over and give somebody a hug. You just want to see somebody face to face, and there's this distance that's going on. So keep that in mind as we think about what Miriam was doing, as she was watching from a distance, but she was still making her impact, because what was she doing? She was making sure that that baby was going to be okay. And we know the Medrash tells us that the daughter of Pharaoh, we discussed this last year in our women's seder, the daughter of Pharaoh came out to take a little dunk in the water, and she hears a sound. She hears the sound of a baby of a baby crying. And she stretches out her arm. This is a whole nother conversation, but she stretches out her arm. It's really far out. Apparently, some midrash brings down that God makes a miracle, and she stretches and reaches, and she brings that baby back. And then Miriam is there to run out from the bushes right then, and wow, what a story, you know. I know a nursemaid, and I can help you, and I can have this baby nursed by somebody, because you probably can't nurse this child, right? And lo and behold, who's the nursemaid? None other than Moses' mother herself, Yocheved, and beautiful. She goes every day to the palace of Pharaoh, where Moses is raised, in Pharaoh's palace, right? So unbelievable story, and he's saved, and wow, he becomes the leader of our people. And his trademark, by the way, when did he become the leader? Was when he was raised in this house of Pharaoh and had no idea what was going on outside of the house. And one day he goes out, and the Torah uses the words, it says, Vayar b'sivlo sam, which means that he saw their burdens, and suddenly he was in so much pain, even though he had nothing to do with it. He was not enslaved, he was free, he was living in Pharaoh's palace. But suddenly He felt so much pain for our nation because that, again, one of the trademarks of the Jewish people, we feel the pain of others. Also very, very apropos to now. But what I want to say is that the idea, the word merachok, the fact that Miriam stood from afar and watched over this little baby brother of hers, was a very difficult thing, because the trademark and the hallmark, part of being a Jew is kind of like, we want to be close, we want to be right there, we don't want to be far. You have something that, think about all the different things that we do as a Jewish nation, right? All the different simchas, all the different beautiful things, the weddings and the bar mitzvahs and the bat mitzvahs and also like the shivas and the funerals and all the things that, what do? We want closeness. We crave it. We want to be there for people. And we're missing that right now. We can't do that. It's like God has said, nope, everything on hold. I'm going to test you. I'm throwing in this nisayon. I'm throwing in this test. And now in the most difficult way, because I know, says God, that your trademark and your thing that you excel in is being there for other people and being close, not merachok, not from far. And now suddenly God says, take it back. Take it back. Merachok, from far. It's not the Jewish way. It doesn't feel like the Jewish way. We want to be close. We want to crave that closeness. But right now, that's not what we're being told to do. So what we have to do is merachok. We have to watch from afar. And we have to still try to make the difference that we can from the distance that we're at. The same way that Miriam had to stand from afar, she couldn't be right there anymore. She had to put that baby in the basket and let go. She had to let go. She had to do her thing. And this is really, it's a very, very, very difficult thing. And it is, in one of the classes that I gave, we kind of discussed, what are ways that we can still give from being rachok, from being far away. So if we have some time at the end, we can open it up here as well. Okay, now we realize we're now going to turn it, and we see that the women in general, the women were kind of noted. They were the ones who kept the home fires burning throughout the time that they were left in Egypt. We see that there's still a few more points I want to make. So number one is that the women were always the ones who had more of the hope of the future. They were always the ones who, even though they were in such a difficult situation in Egypt, they always kept thinking there's going to be a brighter future. There's going to be something afterwards, which is why the very powerful medrash, which talks about how the women would go and they would go out to greet their husbands. They would try to, make their husbands feel so good, and whatever, give them the massage they needed or whatever it was, because they were the ones who saw the future more than the men. The men were kind of like stuck in their physical here and now. They were the ones who were just kind of stuck. But the women were like, no, you don't get it. This is going to end. There's going to be life after this. In fact, when the women left, and this is the bracket that ends the whole story. When the women left, right? If you had to grab one thing from your hut, if you were told right now, guess what, Vicki, this quarantine is almost over, right? Grab something from your house and run. Meet me down there on Rockville Pike because there's going to be something crazy that's going on. And you had one thing that you could have brought with you. Everyone should think about this in their own way. What would be that one thing that you would grab from your house? I mean, who knows, right? And we see that with Miriam guiding the women at the time, what did all the women have? Suddenly, they end up on the other side of the sea, and they're all there, the sea splits, and you see that even though they left with seemingly nothing, suddenly the women are there dancing with their tambourines. What, how, why, when, like what? How did that happen, right? Because when they started leaving their house, they had the anticipation and the preparedness to know, okay, this is happening. This is real. This is happening. I'm going to grab my tambourine and we're going to make this a party. We are going to be there to celebrate. They knew, and I get chills when I say it because it's unbelievable. They knew that they were going to end up on the other side dancing with those tambourines. And yeah, the men were there singing, very nice. We were the ones with the tambourines. We were the ones with the musical instruments. We knew that something was there that was going to make it super duper special. And I think that this is so unbelievable for now when we're thinking about, you know, our Passovers and what we can do to make them meaningful for ourselves, because by the way, a lot of the people that I'm in touch with really are just by themselves. Like, it's really, really special if you have, you know, children and grandchildren, and maybe there are other people in your home that you can share the experience with, but there are plenty people who are literally by themselves. And so even if it means getting that inspiration for yourself, right? It's great if you can pass it on, but it's also being Passover prepared for yourself. And part of that is anticipating. The whole reason that freedom tastes so sweet is because you could start to taste it already, right? When you think about something, what is it, when you think about like a moment that you feel stuck and you want to break through from that barrier, what's making it super duper powerful is over here. It's in your mind. There's nothing else outside of the circumstance of your mind that's making it break through, right? One of my favorite heroines, right, is Dr. Edith Eger, who wrote the book, The Choice, and she talks all about that. She talks all about how you could be stuck, everything is over here. You know, she talks about how, I'm sorry if you've already heard me say this. I know for sure, Nancy, you've heard me say this a few times for sure. But she talks about how when she had to dance, she was a Holocaust survivor, and she had to dance in front of Mengele during the Holocaust. And she was a dancer, and she just, you know, she closed her eyes. She was in the nude, and she had to dance in front of Mengele. And in her mind, she was just as free as a bird. You know, she made herself feel as free as a person could be. And she was the most trapped person at the time. She was so trapped, she could have been killed within 1 second. She could have been off with her head. And she felt free because her mind, that was where she wants her mind to go. And then she talks about, she like flips it to when she actually, she made it out. She survived the Holocaust, and she was in America, and she was on a bus, and she was suffering from PTSD, and she forgot to pay the bus driver the bus fare that she needed to pay. And suddenly the fear that overcame her, she's like hiding under the seat of the bus, and her whole body is shaking. And even though all he's going to do is say, ma'am, can I have your few coins? Like, can you just pay for your bus fare? She feels like her whole world is about to collapse because in her mind, she was totally trapped. You have two circumstances, two scenarios, and in your mind, two totally different situations. Because the taste of real freedom is when you can start to picture and envision yourself with the power of your mind in a more free place. And that's why in this past week's Torah portion, we talk about a sacrifice that the Jewish people brought called the Karban Toda. It was a sacrifice that they would bring for gratitude. And we're told that one of the times that they would bring this sacrifice for gratitude is even if they were still in a situation where they still felt trapped. So you might say like, oh, okay, so they would bring the sacrifice when they got out of a dangerous situation, or when they survived a certain very scary situation, or, you know, whatever. They wanted to express God's gratitude to God. But what we're told is that they would actually bring that sacrifice sometimes when they still felt like they were in that situation. So for example, a person could bring that sacrifice if they were sick and they wanted to express gratitude towards God, almost as like, I'm tasting the sweetness of what it feels like to be healed, and I'm expressing my gratitude towards you. And this is why, my friends, this is why you see that towards, if you're looking in your Haggadah, you'll notice that at the end of the section called Magid, where we tell the story, we put in these 2 paragraphs that start praise. It doesn't seem to make sense. In all other texts, in all other prayers, we have an entire section of praise and thanks and all that stuff that comes later. And suddenly in the Haggadah, you see like smack in the middle of it all, 2 paragraphs of gratitude. And this is the lesson, that even when we're in the depths of the pain and we're in the depths of the, choking circumstance or whatever it is, we can still express gratitude. We can still find something to express gratitude towards. It's all a matter of perspective. And I think that that's such an important thing. And if you want to make that super real for your Seder this year, Dayenu would be a really wonderful time to make your own Dayenu and just express all those things that we have. God, it would have been enough if I would have had a house, Dayenu. But not only do I have a house, I have extra rooms so I can have my own space. And Dayenu if I had my own space, but there's plumbing that works. And Dayenu, but I have technology that also is with us. And Dayenu but there's still food that I could eat. And Dayenu, there's music that I could listen to, and you fill in the blanks. But this is a wonderful opportunity to really, really focus on, although we may feel very trapped, rightfully so. There are a lot of reasons why we should feel trapped right now. This is like lockdown, right? I mean, I just spoke to my sister in Israel, like they can't even leave. Like they literally are like trapped, But Dayenu, there's so many things that we can be saying thank you for, and getting into that mindset of this will end. We'll soon be dancing with our tambourines on the other side. So I've been doing a lot of talk